Hello and welcome to Royale Without Cheese, our bi-weekly podcast in which we discuss both the classic and the unknown of art and popular cinema from the then and now. We are your hosts, me, Tomás Ferreira, and Miguel Aido.
Hey there.
Unfortunately, Lenny couldn't join us today, but this is our talk show segment where we welcome grand indie filmmakers to our wonderful couch and discuss their work. Drew Daniels is a Texan cinematographer based in LA whose credits include Krisha, the 2015 South by Southwest Grand Jury and Audience Award-winning feature film, then Thunder Road, the 2016 Sundance Grand Jury Award-winning short film, as well as A24 projects like It Comes at Night, Ways, and in collaboration with director Sean Baker, the films Red Rocket and most recently Anora, which follows a young sex worker from Brooklyn who meets and impulsively marries the son of a Russian oligarch, only to see her fairy tale marriage be threatened by his parents. Having won the Palme d'Or at this year's Cannes Film Festival and later screened at TIFF, we'll be discussing Anora with him in this episode. So Drew, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. I mean, it's election day here, so
Exactly.
I'm a little nervous, but I just voted and I'm feeling good. Got my sticker.
There you go. There you go. It's a good day for an interview then.
Yeah.
So first of all, we wanted to congratulate you for Anora's big win at Cannes and all the attention it has been receiving. What's particularly interesting, what I found always so particularly interesting about Sean's films, including Anora, is his keen eye for the humanity, the aches and the dreams of those living at margins of society. And in keeping with that tradition at the visual level, you have created, I think, with Sean in Anora, this gritty but elegant atmosphere that is very lived in, very raw, blending observational documentary style through the use of zoom-ins, handheld movement, and long shots. They're very reminiscent of guerrilla filmmaking from the 70s, but with this magical touch that really comes from your anamorphic lens with the bokeh effect, the saturated reds and blues. They really give in to this fairy tale quality in the film. And so being your second project with him, it's clear that you are developing further on those visual notions and that you have this strong collaboration. And so naturally our first question is, how do you feel that your working relationship has evolved since Red Rocket? And upon reading the script for Anora, how did you discuss and prepare the visual look of the film with Sean?
It seems you've definitely done your homework.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. I feel like you've summarized the whole my shtick, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so with Sean, I think that it's just like a natural progression for one, like how your style and your communication with the director and the way you understand them. I mean, it just evolves, and I think that with Sean, I we've become better friends and we've become closer in general. And I feel like half of what a cinematographer does is they try to get into the head of the director and try to understand what they're thinking, understand what they're actually saying or what they're actually after, why they might have written the scene this way. You know, all these things you look for clues, and it's actually a there's this wonderful cinematographer. He shot Little Odessa. Name escapes me right now, but he calls it the detective of photography instead of director of photography,
All right.
which I've always liked that, because yes, it's a very artistic job and instinctive sort of job, but at the same time you have to understand people and understand especially that one person, your director. And I think, as Sean has become a better director, it also has made me a better cinematographer. And the way we found the look of Anora, I mean, it started very early because I remember we had dinner one night and he pitched me like a sort of early synopsis of what the film could be. And this was like very early. The film wasn't even Anora. It was a different sort of thing, but it was a Russian. It followed Russian gangsters, and it was set in Brighton Beach. So I kind of knew the setting and knew the sort of world of the film. And then he mentioned that he wanted it to be the color palette to be like black, white, and red.
All
And I
right.
was like, oh, that was a really interesting palette, you know. So then I started looking at photographs, and immediately this one photograph came to mind. It's a Saul Leiter photo of
Mm-hmm.
a woman with a red umbrella
Yeah.
crossing the street, and it's snowy and gray and bleak, but there's this hint of hope, you know, in this red umbrella. And I thought that was almost an interesting metaphor for the film. Then we just started talking about references. I went on scouts with him early on, me, him, and the producers. We just went to Brighton Beach in the winter or in the fall and just explored, and got a sense of the place. And then we did camera tests. One of the things that really happened in the camera test that really informed the look of the film was that we accidentally underexposed one of the shots very heavily, because it just started raining outside and I didn't compensate or open up the lens. We were just shooting so fast, and I had this the anamorphic Lomo zoom lens on. Yeah, it got dark, and I just kept shooting. And then when we got our dailies, we're looking at it with our colorists and trying to create a LUT, create a look for the film. And we found this shot that was very underexposed and very muddy, very soft because of these lenses. The shadows were lifted and yeah, just muddy, and like the blacks were grainy, and it just had all the right qualities. And we kind of thought, oh, that's it. That's the look of the film. But then, in prep, our prep is not really a normal prep process. We don't really spend a lot of time in the office. We don't really like heavily shot list. We talk about blocking. We talk about maybe a few key shots that we like, or images for scenes. And then on the day is when we really, follow our hearts and our guts, work with the actors, figure out the dialed in blocking, because we have a good idea of what the blocking is. And then on set, we really dial it in. But then we don't really do super involved camera rehearsals, because we don't really like to kill the natural spontaneity that happens on take one, So we kind of walk through it with the actors, and maybe I'll line it up like, this is our first position. We're here. And then this is where you go, and I may make sure my frame's going to be okay, and then we just shoot. And also, I don't like always knowing exactly where the actors are going to be. I think there's something kind of magical about the first take, especially handheld. This has kind of become a rule of mine. Like when I'm shooting handheld, I don't want to rehearse it, because I want the first take. I want to be responding in a very instinctual way to what the actors are doing. If I know exactly what they're going to do and where they're going to go, then it kind of kills that. I like to be surprised on take number one, and see where my natural instincts take me. And if I don't like it, then I'll adjust it for take number two. Or if I feel like we nailed it, sometimes I mix it up, and then I'll do something a little different each take, just to keep it kind of fresh and spontaneous.
Yeah, totally see that because I was watching the film and I really felt there was this Malick quality about what you do because of the handheld nature of it, and the spontaneity of it really is
Yeah,
reacting and bouncing off the actor's performance, which is really interesting. And to allow those
sometimes.
imperfections.
Yeah, sometimes, but also I feel like with this film, see, that's what I assumed Sean Baker was going to be like Malick, because I've actually been on a Terrence Malick set before. I was a
Okay.
camera PA. I was a camera PA in Austin, Texas, on a set with Malick, and I got to observe that process. And I really admire, Emmanuel Lubezki, and
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like there's always a little bit of that in some of my work. But but there was also what was really exciting about this film and about working with Sean, even on Red Rocket, was like I realized that Sean is actually very specific and very. He doesn't like to lose that control of, like, just see what happens naturally. Like Sean is not really like that. He doesn't
Okay.
like to just. He doesn't like that type of filmmaking. He's much more controlled and dialed in, and there is room for improvisation, but he's very much by the script, and he's very much concerned with the composition. And if we can let a shot be as still as possible and wide as possible, like we often will default to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He really likes he's a lot more classic than I thought he would be, which I really appreciate. I really appreciate that confidence and that traditional filmmaking approach. And he really thinks about every cut in a
Mhm.
thoughtful way, and very planned out way. When we're on set, we're talking about what's before, what's next, how it's going to cut, what's the rhythm of the cutting for this scene. Um, So because he's the editor, and because I have a very
Hmm.
editorial brain when I'm shooting, that's very important to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, we can see that there's not that emphasis on over preparing too much what you're going to shoot, although there's that classical formal way of thinking of really understanding this is the script and this is how we have defined that there's that rehearsal on set of where the acts are going to go, but then there's room for improvisation, like you said. But what it is, like you said as well, is that there is an underlining in scouting and really understanding what a set gives to you. And to
Mhm.
that effect, we also want to ask, what were some of the key questions and challenges that you had in your head as a cinematographer when meeting the various locations in Anora, whether it is the Armenian church or the HQ club, the mansion?
I think there's a lot of different approaches to that. And for Sean and for this film and for my approach, I would like to go in and be able to really show the location. Sean loves us having a sense of place in his films. He doesn't like to cheat things too much. He doesn't like, especially geography. He's not that type of filmmaker. He'd rather like obey the geography and obey the
Yeah.
location. And I think that kind of goes for the lighting of the locations as well. And so I like to lean into what's there. And sometimes it might be something really fun and exciting, something you wouldn't really do, you
Mhm.
know, stylistically. But I see something on set, like, or something that I saw during scouting that might inspire me to use that, like maybe a color or maybe a particular lamp or a particular way the light comes in through a window or something like that. Like for example, there's that bedroom scene where she's sleeping and the train goes by and you can see the train outside the window and then you see the
Yeah.
light flickering. Like that was something that we noticed while scouting other locations, and then when we came to that house, we cheated it, but it's a pretty good cheat.
Okay. Yeah.
But I basically just got that from scouting and scouting and scouting through Brighton Beach and scouring neighborhoods for houses and picking pieces of certain houses that you like and anyway, but I do like to scout. It's one of my favorite parts of filmmaking, and I get very inspired and and start. It just helps me take risks sometimes when I'm scouting and I see something interesting. It helps me like make choices that I would not normally make because almost out of necessity.
So, did you ever make a choice on set about a specific location? Oh, let's shoot there. That's very interesting because of this particular detail that I just seen. Was there ever a decision like that that was spontaneous or always backed up by decisions made in pre-production?
I can't really recall. I'm sure there's things that happen like that all the time, but also like we try not to make super firm decisions during pre-production
Okay.
because there's so much that changes all the time. And like, we were also Sean was writing and rewriting as we were shooting often. So I feel like with Sean, it's best not to lock yourself in to certain ideas because then you kind of get connected to that. Like you have a certain image in your head or you're excited about, getting a big light and putting it through that window or whatever. And then on the day you realize, oh, the scene doesn't work here. Let's just change it to an entirely different location. Then, you've wasted money and you've wasted a lot of, just resources. So I think sometimes it's best to just be open and flexible.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
and I think with Sean too, like with Anora, like I had to know when to play my cards, when to have a big light or when to ask for a certain piece of equipment. But it was very minimal. I will say everything we did was super minimal. But I remember at the house, the main house location, I carried an 18K, just one 18K, because I knew that it's wintertime and we're going to lose the light. I'm going to need to light some of these shots night for day and match them to, for example, the big sequence, the home invasion sequence. Some of those shots, like a good handful of those shots, were shot at night, and I had to meter them and match lighting ratios and spot the ceiling and spot the face and spot the shadow
Hmm.
side and like do my best to get them in the ballpark of matching. Um, and it was crazy because I'm using every light on the truck sometimes to do
Yeah.
that. but it was just one of those things that I knew we needed a big light for that location, held on to it. I think for the Armenian church, we had a couple of big lights pushing through the stained glass windows. That's about it. Everything else was pretty much LED lights and 4K. The whole
Yeah.
movie was pretty much that was our package. So I like to keep it pretty small and be flexible and have less people around, you know. And then it's not always the case, but for Sean's films, we're moving fast, like the way we wanted to move on Anora. That was the recipe, you know.
Yeah, I mean, Anora is a film with a lot of nightlife, and to that effect, at some points, you really feel the suggested presence of non-actors. For instance, when we traverse the many clubs and restaurants in search of Ivan when he runs away. So in this regard, how did you manage to shoot in these low light environments? And if there were non-actors involved, what was the process of working with them, namely directing and blocking them?
For a lot of that particular sequence, it was about quantity. And
Mhm.
it was really about getting as many locations and as big of a variety as we could. And some of my favorite parts of that sequence are when we're shooting very, very telephoto. For instance, they go into a pizza shop, they go into a pool hall,
Mhm.
and they go into another restaurant. And we're just shooting really telephoto, and the people that are in the scenes don't know that they're being photographed per se. You know, we're shooting from across the street on a 290, you know, and and so
Mm.
there is we have like a plan for the actors, like, okay, you're gonna go in, you're gonna talk to this guy, you're gonna talk to this guy. Sometimes Sean would have people in earpieces, the actors, so he could feed them lines or he could tell them, okay, now move to this person. We also did this a little bit with Mikey and the club. We wanted to mix that sort of telephoto realness with real people, and then we'd mix in um, a little bit of handheld, and we'd mix in this sort of docu aesthetic. But it was all just to capture that energy and that realness. And like when you have that many characters too, but like five characters, is it five? Well, I guess at that point there's four of them, and then when they
Mhm.
find Yvonne, it's five. But like the way that they weave in and out of each other, and the camera movements can have this sort of quality. It's really fun to operate when you're just on a 290 or zooming, and you don't know where they're going to go, and you're just using their movements to motivate your camera and hand off between people. It's like one of my favorite things to do. We also shot the courthouse scene like that, where we shot it from far away on long lenses so that we could just let them do it. We let them do it like five times, and we shot it from three different angles. And that was it, you know.
Mhm.
And I would just kind of instinctually just pan the camera around and listen to the scene and pay attention and follow the actions and the rhythm of the scenes. And it's so much fun. So um, yeah, we mixed a lot of different styles and approaches on this film, but that one that one was really fun. And yeah, it's like, because this was also like a film that's almost entirely made with professional actors. And so for Sean, that's kind of a departure. He's very much known for his uh his working with first time actors or non actors or non professional actors, whatever. So this was a really nice one where those moments when we are using our real like trained actors to go out and interact with non professionals, it was a very Sean Baker thing to do. You know what I mean? I think it was like almost because we were shooting this film that felt like very much like a professional film in so many levels. Whenever we got to do that, whenever the camera let loose and hit the streets of Brooklyn with this entourage, it felt liberated, especially after shooting the home invasion scene where the camera is often so locked and
Mhm.
formal and
Hmm.
procedural. It almost feels like a Hitchcock scene, some of the shots and some of the way that the camera angles flow from one to the other. We shot them in a sequential order as well. So once we were out of there, we were ready to go. We were ready to hit the streets. We are ready to just throw in real people to just let loose a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost like it was eager to have that scene. Ah, finally, non-actors again.
Yeah, yeah, it was really fun, and it felt very. Sean. It felt like, okay, this is now we're making a Sean Baker movie,
Exactly.
even though we're making it the whole time. But there
Yeah.
was something nice about it and liberating about it.
Hmm. And on another note, what's interesting about the many different sex scenes in the film is that there was this clear effort to visually present each one in a different way, informing the narrative in different manners. For instance, there's a dichotomy, I think, in how intentionally theatrical many of the love scenes are between Ivan and Annie.
Yeah.
But then the final one with Igor holds a much more contained and complex register. So is this right? Could you talk a little bit about how you envisioned the final scene with Annie and Igor in the car? In other words, how the technical choices behind lenses and lighting differed there from previous love scenes?
I mean, yeah, it's just so different. I mean, most of the scenes, if you think about it, most of the sex scenes in the film are one shot. I think usually we do them in one shot, even with Red Rocket. I think 90% of them are just one shot. And they're also kind of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they're usually pretty funny. Like um so we would lean into that. And
Mhm.
yeah, when it came time for the final scene, it echoes the energy. Like for instance, the earlier scenes, they echo the energy of Yvonne, where the camera's like tight and then bounces up and then bounces back down, and when he's like, oh, go faster, go faster, go, oh, slow down, go faster. You know what I mean? Like we are kind of trying to echo the energy of the
Hmm.
scene, and when she has sex with Igor, it's slower, it's more intimate and real, and like I don't know, there's just this calmness and patience to it that I thought was, I don't know, was really it made it stand out for one, and it also just a completely different feeling, like she's contemplated this, and it just has a lot of weight to it, like whereas before it's just kind of fun and exciting and goofy.
Mhm.
This one just felt, I mean, it's the end of the movie, and like I will credit like Sean with the way he wanted to shoot that too. He wanted it to be a oneer. He wanted to push in and then stop and then push in again. It was his idea for the actors to look into the camera, like those two shots when they turn and look at each other. Like
Mhm.
that moment was, I think I was lining up the shot, and then I was like, okay, I had them looking kind of like right here, so their eye line was tight but not to the lens.
Hmm.
And he was like, "No, I want it tighter, tighter, tighter. Just have him look into the lens." And I was like, "Oh, wow, okay." And as soon as he said it, I was just like, "This is amazing. It's going to make the ending of this film so much more powerful and stand out. It just has so much confidence in the filmmaking too."
For sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's like there's a mask that falls off, I think, from Annie at that point because she's looking directly at us, the audience. There's a new intimacy that is not. There's almost like there's two different kinds of intimacy. The intimacy that is fabricated, almost with the sex worker logic and the work relationship that entails. With Ivan, always kind of, is this personal? Is this purely commercial? What is it? But there at the end, it's even the lenses used. I think I don't know if you use a 35 millimeter normal lens, but if just feel, the feeling of it in the scene feels very. There's a presence that is utterly different from what we've seen before. This idea, kind of thinking, what lenses did you use on the scene if it was a 35 millimeter, because it feels like it's a normal viewpoint of someone inside the car. Um,
Oh, actually, no. I think we used a 50. I think
okay.
we used a
Mhm.
50 for, I think, almost the whole scene. Yeah, even the one that pushes in, it just felt like there's something about the 35, like it plays well for a lot of the other stuff, but it has this stylized quality to it with the curves and the way it bends,
Hmm.
and we didn't want it to distract from that moment. So I think shooting it on the 50 neutralized a little bit of that and made it feel a little bit more serious almost. I often use the 75 and the 50 for moments like that, or the 100. And the 35, I love that lens, but I use that a lot earlier in the film. I mean, we used it a lot. I mean, it was my favorite lens for the film, 35 and the 75. But it's also like tight quarters. The 50 had a good close focus, and yeah, it worked really well for that. And yeah, I just didn't want to have the camera like right in there on them. I wanted it to be a little bit further back to
Hmm.
just not get in their way so
Of
much.
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
also because it's a car, it's kind of a tricky situation to film inside, I
Yeah.
imagine.
Oh, and that scene was really hard. I mean, we shot that scene over 3 different days.
Oh,
Not the
wow.
whole
Okay.
scene, but just
Oh,
chunks of it. We would just do pieces of it. We did the first part where it's snowing outside and he goes up to the stairs and then he comes back into the car and they look at each other. That was one day. And then we did the part where I think like a continuation of that. We did his coverage the next day and then part of her coverage. And then basically it was time to do the last part of the scene where she climbs on top of him, and it was just not intimate enough of a space. We were like right on the sidewalk on the main road on one of the main roads in Brighton Beach, and we are just like, this couldn't this it wasn't gonna work. And we didn't have the control that Sean wanted and that the actors wanted, so we moved. Um we moved to an entirely different location down the road, and that was like on a dead end. And we had to match it, you know. And fortunately, we had enough snow accumulated on the windows that it works. You don't really notice that it's totally different backgrounds. Yeah, because just at that point, the snow it kind of blocks. The snow is the background, but yeah, it was really difficult scene issue, especially for the actors. So I was just trying, so doing it as a oneer and doing it on that a little bit longer lens, getting out of their way a little bit helped.
hmm. Yeah, and now we're talking about the character of Igor as well. Delving into him, he's quite an interesting character because he kind of is a veiled Prince Charming, so to speak, in the sense that he has this brute male facade, but
Mm-hmm.
behind that's kind of a compassionate guy, looking out for Annie in this silent way. He's this third perspective that comes along in the
Yep.
film, in the background. So one of our questions is also, what were your visual concerns on how to frame his character, being the second voice that he becomes in the film?
I had a lot of fun framing him, behind Annie or like in the same shot with her as much as I could. Or there's a really wonderful moment in the car where it's like it's at outside the courthouse and she's begging him, she's begging Yvonne, like, Yvonne, come on, don't do this, like you stand up, for us, like, and it's like here is Yvonne and I'm eager and Annie's here and he's just framed like, in the middle as this he's kind of
Hmm.
stuck between the two of them.
Yeah.
And so like there was fun and hopefully subtle ways to put him in the backgrounds or in a two shot with her, like on the airplane, they're in a two shot. Outside the airplane, it's her and then Eager in the back, and he's in the sunlight and she's in the shade. And just the way that he's in the back in
Yeah,
the
that's very powerful. Yeah,
light
remember.
kind of glowing. Yeah, he's glowing. He's almost like this knight in shining armor.
Yeah.
And it was hopefully like, and that's just kind of how he landed. They were trying to get on the airplane, but we were able to just find that composition, and it ended up holding a lot of meaning in it. And I think that there was often times to do that, even in the car when they're driving. You can see she's framed and out of focus behind her, like you can see Eager. Like when they're driving away from the club, and she's got like the cut on her face, and yeah,
Hmm.
Eager is framed behind her. And he's always kind of observing her, and he's like this strong presence. And yeah, and then I think you mentioned something about like, also in the other scene, like about sex being transactional is kind of like what it was sort of the idea about how transactional sex is and how sex is like her superpower in a way. And then in the end of the film, it kind of comes full circle and the mask is sort of stripped away from her and she falls back to her superpower and then falls apart, and
Hmm.
finally has that moment where she can fall apart and have someone to fall apart with, and I don't know, I just love that moment.
Yeah.
The ending of the
Yeah.
film is my favorite. One of my favorites is just when they're on the couch, when they're watching the Weather Channel and they're just talking to each other and smoking a blunt and passing it back and forth. And I just love the way that they're framed together in that scene. It's very intimate. It's very like these like kind of classic overs, between the two of them. Yeah, like there's this playfulness, and I like the light is very subtle, and the TV. I don't know, just something. it's a nice like come down after all the insanity of the film and the frenetic energy for that quiet, still scene. It really works well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And despite being a still scene, you still, as you said, kind of are anticipating her breakdown in some way. So it's interesting to see how then it comes along in the car scene where she finally cries. Because at least an audience member, you're always kind of, at least I was expecting that scene, and it was, for me, it was really great to see how it was used finally at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask something that relates to a thought I had watching the film. It was interesting to me to notice the weather shift in the story of Anora, how we go from sunny summer vibes and colors to a darker, colder tone with the falling snow, and kind of
Hmm.
mimics the arrival of the Russian and Armenian goons. So it's a shift that parallels directly with the plot. And given this significance, I wanted to know how relevant it was for you and Sean to have the third act and specifically the ending laced with snow. And I think you touched on it a bit, but to what extent it proved challenging to shoot.
Yeah, weather was a very I don't know, it was a big conversation for us, and it was something that we tried to plan out as best we could. We tried to have like a clear pattern that mirrored the story and echoed the story and the characters and what Annie's going through. And yeah, the beginning is the beginning. It's cold, but there's also some sunny beats here and there. And they go to Vegas, and Vegas is colorful and bright and a party. And then once the goons show up, yes, it's cold. We were trying to commit to like a colder look and feel for all of that, all the way up to the point where like the parents show up, and then they drag them to Vegas, and it's sunny again, and it ends in a really cold, snowy place. And we got literally the driest winter on record, I think, in New York City. So we didn't get any snow at all. None. I mean, it was crazy. We got rain, lots of rain. We've got sun. We got everything else but snow. So, we had to create the snow at the end. And even some of those scenes, like this is one of my favorite things, like the scene where they come out of Chase Bank at the end. It's just a quick shot where they come out and there's like a train going by and they're walking towards the car, and then I think it cuts to them pulling up to the house and snowing outside. That one of Brighton Beach was stolen. We stole that shot, and we had the actors go into Chase Bank and come out of Chase Bank. Even after the security guard told us we couldn't film there, we did it anyway. And we had snow machine blowing fake snow on the sidewalk of a shot that we were stealing. It was crazy. And we did it and got away with it. And we did like two takes, I think, two takes, maybe even one take, and then we were done. So the weather, we tried to mirror it. It's a small film, so we had to be flexible with our schedule. Like if it was just completely the wrong weather, we would try to massage the schedule and maybe shoot something else, and as best as we could. We really wanted it to feel cold and miserable as much as possible.
So speaking of a specific scene, another one, the home invasion scene is particularly well achieved. It gracefully shifts tones, dramatic to hilarious. It propels the story forward. But to me, it was also really well shot, considering it's a lengthy scene with a lot of our main characters in a kind of contained environment and them moving a lot as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it seemed to be a particularly tricky scene to block. And so we were wondering if you could dive into this scene a bit, how it was imagined, and some of the challenges, perhaps, and concerns you had.
Well, that is probably the most, planned scene that we had for the whole film. We attempted to shot list it, but it just, I feel like shot listing that scene, we went to the location to shot list it. And what we ended up doing really instead of shot listing it was we ended up blocking it because it was so long. It was like 30 pages or something. We didn't have enough time to go shot by shot and get through the whole thing. It was just not really how it would work anyway. So what we did was we figured out the blocking, figured out where they were going to start, where the action at the door would take place, where the action in between the door and the stairs would take place, and then like his escape, and then Annie being cornered over to the other side of the room, and then the couch. So we wanted to we knew where we wanted to go from like A to B to C to D, and then it was just like a matter of like finding the ways to get the actors over there, the action, so that we can get as much sort of destruction and out of the breakable items and things like that as we can get. Um, and we also wanted the scene to have an evolution to it visually. We wanted it to start very still, very controlled, and be all static or on a dolly. And then the camera starts moving a little bit more. Then there's these moving masters, and then that it stays in a static or classical tripod dolly mode until Toros arrives.
Mm-hmm.
And his arrival sort of brought the handheld. It brought this sort of, okay, the boss is here. It brought this imbalance, And then, they're yanking the ring off of her and she's screaming and all of that stuff. So the handheld felt really appropriate. And then we wanted it to evolve back into a very classic locked off language once he's sitting down on the couch with her negotiating. After they go outside and have a cigarette and say, okay, we have to break this bitch. And Igor's inside on the couch with her, then we wanted to come back in and have this classic language that would then bring us back into a more locked off language for the rest of the looking for Yvonne, which we sometimes went handheld just out of necessity, but usually we were trying to be more locked off and classical in our approach. But yeah, that scene was just full of challenges. I mean, the weather, the lighting inconsistencies, and creating continuity out of total inconsistent light all day between, I think we shot it over 8 days. So it was a magic trick, to make it look like one continuous time. And then of course I mentioned earlier we're shooting night for day, but we had to because we would lose the light at around 4 p.m. or 3:30 p.m.
Well,
and we couldn't start shooting until about 8. So like I had to be walking around with the meter and say, okay, we can start shooting, and then at the end of the day be like, okay, we have to figure out what we can shoot that doesn't involve looking out the windows, because so it was it was a lot. And then we wanted to shoot it in order, so sometimes we'd call it and be like, okay, we're going to shoot something else. We're done with this scene for today. We'll come back tomorrow. Let's go shoot some nighttime scenes upstairs or whatever it would be. Sometimes there weren't even being any more nighttime scenes, so sometimes we would just make up scenes. Let's shoot a sex scene here, or let's shoot them, a montage beat. Sometimes it was just inventing some scenes just so that we had something to shoot because we were out of light and out of wide shots. You know what I mean?
And on the matter of challenging shots and scenes, we want to know if what would you say was a difficult moment to shoot in Anora, whether for technical reasons or otherwise?
I mean, I think on a technical level, it would probably just be the balancing act of that big scene, because every day, like, we would shoot it in order, and every day Sean would show up with like new pages, so the actors were having to learn new lines, and we'd adjust the blocking each day. But it was also really fun as the day would wind down, and you're having to dim all of your lights to match the outside exposure. I'm inside just freaking out and dying inside every single day, and then like not knowing if we had it until we get the dailies a couple days later. And then there of course were moments where you're shooting a shot and I'm just like, I know that we should not be shooting this shot right now. It's too dark. The outside is too dark. I have to light the inside, and like, well, my lights are down to like 1%, and I'm pushing it a stop or even 2 stops at this point, and I'm just like, oh God, how is this ever gonna work?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you just kind of have to. I try not to like over prioritize the image at the same time. Like I like there to be a little messiness. I like there to be a little bit of grain. I like there to be dolly bumps and things like that. Like we didn't lay dolly track hardly ever. Like we dollied right on the floors for most of our locations. I tried to welcome those sort of errors and inconsistencies and mistakes, like happy accidents. Create a lot of space for happy accidents to happen,
Yeah.
But it's funny, like I always say like, oh yeah, that was the most difficult. Oh, that was the most difficult. Like they were all really difficult. There was nothing in this film that was like that simple. I think maybe the easiest one to shoot for me was probably the courthouse because I just I had like one big light. I had uh long lens shooting it from one angle, long lens shooting it from the other angle, and you just piece it all
Mhm.
together. And it was just really fun and pretty straightforward and chaotic. And it was a real joy to shoot that type of stuff. And we shot it fast. I feel like we shot that scene in, I don't know, like I don't know, 2 hours or less. It was just race through it because we shot it that way. And we had a lot to shoot that day. Um, but yeah, it was all pretty tough. There was nothing that easy about shooting Anora.
Yeah, yeah. And so finally, we want to ask on a wider note, if you can perhaps share, are there any future projects in the planning with Sean that you could perhaps tease for our listeners, or in general, a project that you may be working at the moment, coming soon, that you feel excited about and that they can look forward to?
To be honest, I don't have any projects uh right now. Um, I'm hoping to see where Anora goes and what it leads to. I think it'll lead to something pretty great. But I think with Sean, yeah, we kind of talked about another project. There's two that are on the up and coming to future list, and
Hmm.
which one happens first, I'm not sure, but both of them are fun and exciting and uh, quite different than Anora. So I think
Mm.
that's all I'll say. But yeah,
Of course.
it's gonna be yeah. I love this collaboration. I love working with Sean. I feel like we work so well together and push each other in interesting ways. And yeah, I think only our third collaboration. I mean, we'll see. I mean, look what our second collaboration has gone so far already, and I can only imagine what the third will be, and if there's more. I hope to have a lifelong collaborator in Sean and just love working with him. It's always fun and exciting and unpredictable. So it's
Mhm.
all things that I like.
Yeah, of course.
Just ask if there's a particular moment, shot or scene in your filmography that you're very proud of, just that you can
Hmm.
say that you were particularly proud of having achieved.
I'm very proud of the movie Waves, to be honest, and some of the moments in Waves. I think one of my greatest achievements in my mind, cinematically, is in Waves, where you have the end of the first part of the film at the party and then into the cop car where it transitions to her face. You go from his face into like these colors and then it goes to her face and pulls out and we're in a tunnel and there's this like rhythmic lighting happening from the lights in the tunnel
Hmm.
and you basically go from one chapter of the film about him to the next chapter of the film about her and he's not even really in it anymore and it just the whole tone shifts, everything shifts. I think that's one of my favorite moments in my
Yeah.
film career so far. I also think the end of Anora is something I'm very proud of. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, there's just something so patient and confident and beautiful about that ending. And I think it's an ending that people talk about for years and hopefully you watch it several times and you still process it. I've had so many people just reach out after the film and just tell me, man, that ending. Like they just come out of the film and they're just buzzing. So yeah, I'm really proud of it. I'm proud of Anora. I'm proud of that Anora is the indie film that it is because it's had so much success. It is a tiny movie made with lots of heart and lots of soul, and it's bold. And I think these are the kind of films that people want, the kind of films that I want, kind of films that I like to shoot. And I think it gives a hope for independent cinema and hopefully just cinema in general. I think it felt like a big win when we won the Palme d'Or, not only for us but for American independent cinema.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mhm.
Definitely. Definitely, because the marketing gave also um, oversaturated with these, big blockbusters. So to find a story with such emotional poignancy is very and human in its small
Yeah,
story is powerful. And I have to say, just
Yeah.
a little footnote on your waves work, because I think the film really breathes something special through your visuals. And on your note about Lubeski, you have that spinning
Yeah.
pen on the inside the car, and I thought, he did it.
Yeah.
Because I knew he was an influence, I think, to you. So yeah, it was interesting. The whole movie behaves like that, like precisely waves, emotional waves, in the
Yeah,
way you
of
have the
course.
camera moving throughout. Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully the camera movement, mirrors the emotional waves that the film goes through. There's
Yeah.
the aspect ratios, the lensing, the movement, everything is hopefully, the idea was that it is in service to the characters, to the psychological journey of the characters and emotional journey of the characters. And to an extent, I think I did that a little bit with Anora, but Anora is much more observational. So,
Yeah.
and they're just such different filmmakers, Sean and Trey. They're so similar in many ways, but their approaches are very different, which I really love that because it's fun to get to work with different filmmakers and with different styles. I don't like to do the same thing every time, so
Yeah, of
Yeah, for
course.
sure.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very fun, challenging.
Yeah. By the way, what scares you in the project?
Oh man, that's one of my criterias for taking on a project is it's got to scare me.
Yeah.
So I'd say the things that scare me is when the director doesn't know what the hell they're doing, or what they
Oh, that's
when the
bad.
director
That's not a good
doesn't know what
scare.
they want. If the director
Yeah.
doesn't know what they want, then that's just terrifying because then it's like I don't want to be the only person coming up with images or coming up with visuals or I want to work with a collaborator, I want to work with a director, a real director. So that scares me when I see the signs that I'm like, oh God, this person is not a real director.
Right. Oh,
that
jeez.
that that scares me, but I'm hopefully that doesn't happen too much anymore. In serious though, like everything scares me. Technical challenges, tonal balances, you don't have a lot of money but you want it to look big, like crazy shooting schedules, all those things, they're scary. And subject matter, I like subject matter that's that scares me, that's unconventional, that pushes boundaries. And I think that there's a lot of things, but I think it has to be scary or else that's not really worth doing. So
And that was the latest from Drew Daniels, folks. We would like to thank his presence here today. He is truly an excellent filmmaker, and remember to check out Anora in a theater near you or once out in streaming platforms. If you're a filmmaker running the festival marathon, feel free to send us a message for an interview as well. We would love to promote your work. Don't forget to subscribe, share this interview, or simply give us a like. That's how our podcast can grow ever more groovy. And if you're on YouTube and want to see more interviews like this, check out this next video right here. Thank you for listening and see you next time.